have experience with homeschooling. And not only that, I have experience with those feelings, those sensations, those mentally debilitating thoughts that make you want to quit. Right now, we are going to talk about 3 mistakes homeschoolers make that contribute to that feeling, that sense that, I can't possibly sustain this. This is just too difficult. Hello there, I am Danielle, homeschooling mother of 7. There are a few things that I'm really passionate about, and homeschooling is one of them. I was homeschooled myself, and I knew from the moment that I was old enough to think about having kids of my own that I too was going to homeschool. Let me just preface this. I am not an expert. I don't know what you have to do to become an expert, but I do not have it all figured out. The first mistake homeschoolers make is not having the reason that they homeschool. I'm not talking about a reason or a dozen reasons. I'm talking about the reason. That's a defined reason that you yourself, not because of what you've read or what people have told you or what other people's reasons are, you yourself have defined the reason that you choose to homeschool. I can list probably a dozen reasons, but I have the reason. And that is that I want to grow old with my kids. It's funny to say that, but you say that to your husband, we're going to grow old together. My children are growing old. They are growing up, and I want to be there for their growing up. The sacrifice of hours at school is too great. And this is my very big and personal reason. I want us to grow up together as a family. So you don't have to create an elaborate mission statement, an elaborate purpose. You just have to have that one reason, the reason that you homeschool. That reason will always be bigger than all of the difficulties that come as you're homeschooling, as you're going on your homeschooling journey. So then when I add all the other reasons, the things that are being taught in public school, the things that are not being taught in public school, I don't even have a question in my mind as to whether or not I'm doing the right thing. You have someone persuasive talking to you about the benefits of a different form of education, and you can be persuaded. But if you have that one reason, and it is a heart reason, not just a head reason, you will be able to sustain your decision. The second mistake that homeschoolers make is not staying inspired. If you've watched some of my other videos, you know that I love doing things in increments of 15 minutes. In fact, watch my video about 15 minutes. So you have your reason, the reason you're homeschooling, but the daily grind is hard. The day after day after day of teaching your children in an imperfect environment. If there are a lot of kids in your home, like there are a lot of kids in my home, silence is not a luxury I get very often. And so I still have to school my kids in the environment that we are in. And that's not saying that I don't try to keep an environment that is as peaceful as possible during our schooling hours, but realistically, it's not quiet very often. There are 3 things I use to stay inspired in homeschooling. One is podcast or anything online that is inspiring. I like to occasionally listen to Pam Barnhill because she does The Morning Basket, or Sarah Mackenzie. She wrote a book that I just love. So I have the files from the homeschool conventions that I've been to in the past, and they are the teachings that were going on during that seminar. And some of them were just super inspiring, and I will listen to one of an evening or maybe 15 minutes during the day if I need to be reminded why I'm doing what I'm doing, and to get those, the feels, the inspired feels, like, okay, I can do it another day. Because that's all we're looking for here. We're not looking for inspiration to last us the next decade. Teaching or podcasts. Second one is reading. For the first part of my homeschool journey, I religiously read 15 minutes a day of a homeschool book or a parenting book. And this is just to keep me inspired. This is just to keep me relevant in my choice. Honey for a Child's Heart. I love that one. It just reminds me of the importance of what I'm doing, the importance of reading to my kids, and just having those conversations and adventures together. Better late than early. I love that one. It gives me some added inspiration when I'm like, my 6-year-old's not reading. I'm a failure. And they just talk about the value of play, the value of letting a child go at its own pace. There have been times where I've been teaching school and I have an earphone in one ear and my phone in my back pocket, and I'm listening to something that inspires me as I'm helping the kids with their school. That might seem strange, but sometimes I need to stay level-headed about what I'm doing. When things are not going well in a school day, it's easy to feel like you want to pull out your hair, scream at everybody, and slam the door and run away. maybe nobody else feels that way. The third thing in staying inspired is the people who share my heart about homeschooling. We're at the conference. Look at us. Now, this is not just everybody. There's a fine line here. You do not want to be hanging out with people who are constantly talking negatively about homeschooling, or even if they're homeschooling, but they just have so much negative stuff to say about the whole process and the whole journey. That's not positive for you. On the farther side of the spectrum, you don't want to be hanging out with someone constantly that is telling you always how perfect everything is, how much their children are learning, and how seamless and flawless their whole school system is, because you will end up being like, I could never do that. That's impossible for me. I cannot do what they do. So why do it at all? You got to have your people, your bros, your sisters, your girls, your moms that share your heart about homeschooling. And so you can talk to you about the difficult times, and they're always going to remind you of the purpose behind what you're doing. So these things are going to be different for you, but you got to find it. When you are reading something and you just have that inspiration flooding your mind or flooding your heart, a book or a newsletter or an email or a podcast, write it down so I can return to this and I will be reminded and inspired in my journey. The third mistake that homeschoolers make is gauging their child's growth by public school standards. Now, public school standards are very linear. They are created specifically for a public school setting, a setting where there are a large number of children. You could get a What My Third Grader Should Know book that's this thick, and you'll read 3 pages and you'll be like, well, I'm a failure. I quit. Don't be reading stuff that is feeding into the lie that you can't do this, that you're not super qualified, that you're not the best person for the job, actually. And I'm not saying don't get resources. I'm not saying don't get help. I'm saying that don't use the same standards. My husband went to public school and he was a good test taker. He told me he didn't read a single book in high school, but he took tests well. If the only thing that we are trying to teach our children is just to take tests well, we're not actually giving them an education. Education is so much more than book learning, so much more than academics. I don't like to spend time on nonsense. If there are pages in a child's book that I'm like, this is totally unnecessary, or there's 5 pages here of something that we can have a 5-minute conversation about, and I can see that you understand this, we don't have to waste our time on this. That's the beauty of being mom, being you, the person who knows their child better than anybody, knows how to best push their child into their potential, into what suits them. You might not love this because it's not as measurable, but find a measuring rod that works for you. And don't put this pressure on yourself to meet the standards of a system that is not tailor-made for independent learning. We want our children to absorb information that is valuable and helps them function well in the world around them. But also we want them to absorb information that helps them thrive with their unique personalities, with their unique abilities. If I could just help you get free in this one area, I would say throw it out. Gauge their learning based on, did you get something today that you didn't know yesterday? Did you have a conversation that illuminated a subject? Did you read something new? Did you share an experience? And if you need to give your kids tests a couple times a year to kind of gauge where their holes in education are, do it. You're free to do that too. But don't get so discouraged when you do those things that you want to quit. All right, my friends, my homeschooling moms, homeschooling dads, families out there, be encouraged. You can do this. Remember, all you need is the one reason. No one can mom your kids like you. And I'm going to tell you this, it might blow your mind. No one can actually school your kids like you. I don't mean that someone can't help you and go alongside of you and be a support to you and teach your children something, but no one can school them in the same way because no one loves them the same way that you do. And there's an impact and a value that bleeds into education here that you cannot ignore. All right, signing off. I will see you next time. I do have a bunch of homeschooling videos. Please watch those and more to come as we're gearing up for the school year.